The first time Laura said, "You can live here," my suitcase was still in my hand, and my chest felt like it had swallowed a live wire. Not because I was tired from the 10-hour drive, or because the street was so quiet I could hear my own pulse. It was the way she looked at me when she opened the door. Calm, careful, like she already knew what I didn't want to admit. If I stayed in that house for 3 months, something in me was going to change. Then she added, without blinking, "But under one condition." I gave a nervous laugh. "Sure, name it." She didn't smile. "No personal relationships. None. You rent a room. That's it." I nodded like a grown man with common sense. But inside, I felt the floor tilt because I'd rented rooms before and nobody had ever needed a rule like that. My name is Michael Hayes. I'm 28, and I work construction, commercial builds, steel and framing. The kind of job that makes you sleep hard and wake up sore. Back in Ohio, life had started slipping in quiet ways. Rent jumped, hours got cut. My dad's medical bills didn't wait for me to catch up. So when my foreman offered a 3-month assignment in Washington State, good pay, steady work, I said yes before he finished the sentence. Housing was the problem. Hotels would eat my savings. Crew dorms were full. So I scrolled listings at midnight and found Laura's. Spare room, tidy house, quiet home, no parties. Her messages were polite, efficient. Deposit sent. Done. At 9:47 p.m., light rain blurred the streetlights as I pulled into her driveway. 2 stories. Porch light on. A basketball by the garage. A wind chime ticking softly. It looked normal, the kind of place you'd drive past forever and never guess it could rearrange your life. When the door opened, warm light spilled out, and Laura stood there in jeans and a soft sweater, hair loosely tied back. 39, like the listing said, but numbers didn't explain her. Her eyes met mine and held. Not flirtatious, evaluating. A mother's look. A woman who'd learned that kindness without boundaries is an invitation to trouble. "You're Michael," she said. "Yes, Laura. Thanks for letting me come so late." "It's fine. Shoes off, please." The living room smelled like lemon cleaner and something baked earlier. A hallway lamp glowed. On a shelf, a few framed photos sat face down, like someone had turned them over on purpose. My brain snagged on that. Who hides their own memories? Then a voice came from upstairs. "Mom!" A boy appeared at the top of the stairs, half-shadowed, watching me like I was a stranger near his campfire. 12, skinny, dark hair falling into his eyes. He didn't come down. "Nate," Laura said gently. "This is Michael. He's renting the upstairs room for a while." Nate's gaze flicked to my duffel bag, then back to my face. No hello, no smile, just a tight nod, like he was checking a box. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice light. "Nice to meet you." He disappeared without answering. I felt my stomach tighten. A 12-year-old can make you feel judged without saying a word. Laura caught my reaction like she was used to reading silence. "He's protective," she said. "It's just him and me." "I get it," I said. "My little sister was like that." Laura's mouth tightened at the idea of anything personal. "Let me show you the room." Upstairs, the air was cooler. The spare room was clean, simple, bed, dresser, small desk, a window facing the street. A folded towel sat on the bed like a hotel, and that small detail hit me harder than it should have. Someone had prepared for me, carefully, like control mattered here. "Bathroom is across the hall," Laura said. "Kitchen is yours to use, but I need to be clear about boundaries." That's when she laid down the rule again. "You can live here, but under one condition. No personal relationships." In that moment, I should have felt relief. Easy lines. Just work. Just a room. Instead, her voice made it sound less like a preference and more like a scar. I nodded. Understood. She watched me an extra second, deciding whether to believe me. Then she handed me a key. "Rent is due every Friday. If anything feels off, we talk. No surprises." "Fair," I said, trying to sound steady. She turned to leave, then paused. "Michael." "Yeah. This works only if we both respect it." I swallowed. We will. She went downstairs, and her steps faded into the quiet. Downstairs, a cabinet closed softly. Then another sound, Laura's phone buzzing, her voice low and clipped, the kind you use when you don't want a kid to hear fear. I caught only 2 words through the vent. Not tonight. After that, silence again. I stared at my unpacked boots and thought, what did I just walk into? And it felt aimed at me. I stood alone with that key cold in my palm, rain tapping the window, and I realized I just moved into a house where everyone was holding their breath. And the dangerous part was, I already wanted to be the reason they finally exhaled. The morning I almost broke Laura's one rule. It happened over something as stupid as a porch light. Her hand brushed my forearm. One quick, grateful touch, then snapped back like she'd hit a live wire. She didn't apologize. She didn't explain. She just looked past me into the dark yard and said, too calmly, "Good night, Michael." And I stood there thinking, why does a simple touch feel like trouble in this house? I'm Michael Hayes, 28, construction crew on a 3-month commercial build outside Tacoma. I took this room because hotels would have eaten my paycheck and my life back in Ohio was already tight. Rent up, family bills piling, no safety net. I'm telling you this because I used to believe rules kept things clean. But Laura's rule, no personal relationships, wasn't about manners. It was a warning label. The first weeks should have been boring. Early alarms. Long days. When I came downstairs, Laura was already moving like a quiet storm. Lunchbox packed, keys found, hair tied back, eyes scanning the day for traps. She was 39, divorced, raising her 12-year-old son alone, and she carried herself like someone who'd learned not to need anyone. Nate watched me like a guard dog in socks. He'd pour cereal, keep his head down, and vanish. If I said morning, I'd get a grunt that could have meant yes or leave. Still, there were cracks. One Thursday the toaster popped and he flinched. Stupid thing, he muttered. It's not stupid, I said. It's dramatic. He paused. Then the smallest twitch pulled at his mouth. Not a smile, more like a crack in a wall. By week 2, my hands started doing what they do when my brain won't shut up. Fixing. The back gate sagged. The bathroom fan screamed. The basketball hoop over the garage leaned like it had given up. I didn't ask permission for the little stuff. I just tightened screws and kept it quiet. Laura caught me at the gate with a wrench. You don't have to. I know, I said. I want to. She studied me like kindness might be a trick. Then she nodded once. Thank you. Plain words, but they landed hard. Nate came out back with a basketball, hovered, then surprised me. You actually know how to fix things? That's kind of my job. He pointed at the crooked hoop. That's been like that forever. Give me 10 minutes. He returned with a dusty wrench like he'd been waiting for a reason. We worked side by side, mostly silent, but it wasn't hostile anymore. When the hoop finally sat straight, he bounced the ball once and said, almost embarrassed, okay, cool. Laura stepped onto the porch and froze like she'd walked into a scene she didn't expect. Her son standing close to a stranger, not pulling away. I saw relief flicker in her eyes, followed immediately by fear. Later, when Nate went inside, she said quietly, he doesn't warm up to people. I didn't do anything, I said. Her gaze held mine. That's not true. Winning Nate's trust didn't make Laura happy. It made her careful. The next hook arrived in a truck. A dark pickup rolled up one afternoon while I was getting home. The driver stared before he even got out. Mid-40s, broad shoulders, confidence that took up space. He walked up the driveway like he owned it. You the new guy? He asked. Renting a room. He smirked. Rick. Neighbor. The way he said it felt like a claim. He opened the screen door without waiting and called, Laura. She appeared in the entryway, polite frost on her face. Rick. His eyes flicked to me, then back to her. He leaned in to say something low. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw Laura's shoulders stiffen. Then she glanced at me, quick, controlled, like she was measuring the damage. Rick finally turned and gave me a thin smile. Welcome. When he left, Laura exhaled like she'd been underwater. I asked, does he bother you? No, she said too fast. Then she picked up Nate's backpack, and her hand shook. That night, the hallway light flickered and died. I heard Laura rummaging, muttering, trying to keep her voice calm for Nate upstairs. I stepped out. Need help. She stood there with a flashlight, hair loose, exhaustion softening the edges she kept so sharp. It's fine, Michael. It's a bulb, I said. Not a hostage situation. For a second her mouth almost smiled. Almost. Please, she whispered. Don't make this complicated. I'm not, I promised. I'm just here. We ended up on the porch. Cold air. Wet cedar smell. Her flashlight angled up while I twisted the dead bulb free. When the new one clicked in and the light snapped back on, she let out a breath and, without thinking, touched my forearm. Then she pulled away. Good night, she said, already retreating. Good night, I answered, heart pounding, because I finally understood. Her rule wasn't about keeping me distant. It was about keeping herself safe. And the problem was, I didn't want to be distant anymore. And once you start wanting more, every quiet moment turns dangerous. Fast. The night I heard Laura cry, I stood in the hallway with my hand on the doorknob, trapped between two bad choices. Knock and break her rule, or walk away and pretend I didn't hear it. I'm Michael Hayes, 28, a construction guy from Ohio on a 3-month job near Tacoma. I rented a room to save money, not to get tangled in a life that wasn't mine. But living under the same roof teaches you the difference between quiet and okay. It was after midnight. A thin strip of light glowed under Laura's door. No TV, no music, just the muffled sound of someone fighting for control of their breathing. I knocked once. Laura, I whispered. It's Michael. Are you all right? A pause. Then her voice tight. I'm fine. That word again. Fine like a deadbolt. You don't sound fine, I said before I could stop myself. The door opened an inch. Her eyes were red, but her posture was straight. She didn't invite me in. She didn't step out. She just held the line. Michael, please. That please wasn't anger. It was exhaustion. I nodded. Okay. I'm here if you need anything. I turned away and the front door rattled. 3 hard knocks slammed into the quiet. Laura's face shifted. Fast. Not surprise. Fear. The kind you learn. She stepped into the hall and pulled her door shut behind her. Stay upstairs, she breathed. Then Rick's voice cut through the wood. Laura, open up. I saw the light. It was past midnight. Nate was asleep. No decent man shows up like that. Rick? Laura called. Too calm. Go home. Don't do this, he said louder. I'm worried about you. Worried, right? Concern used like a crowbar. I moved down the stairs just enough to be heard. Hey, it's late. She said go home. Laura whipped her head toward me. Warning and panic together. The rule. No personal. No involvement. But this wasn't romance. This was safety. The doorknob jerked. Who's that? Rick barked. You got some guy in there now? Rick, stop, Laura said. I kept my voice steady. Leave. Now. Rick laughed. Sharp. Listen, kid, you don't know her. You don't know what she needs. My hands curled into fists. I know she needs you to leave. A beat. Then footsteps on the porch, retreating but still loud with ego. This isn't over, Laura, he called. You hear me? An engine started. Wet tires hissed. Silence rushed back in. Laura leaned against the wall, eyes closed, catching her breath like she'd been underwater. I'm sorry, I said. I didn't mean to get in the middle. You shouldn't have done that, she snapped, then softened immediately, like the sharpness tasted wrong. You're a tenant. This is my mess. It's a man who doesn't respect no, I said. Her throat worked. He used to. Down the hall, a floorboard creaked. Nate's door cracked open. Mom! Laura turned and became calm on command. Go back to bed, honey. Everything's okay. Nate's eyes flicked to me, then back to her. Was that Rick? Yes, she said. He's gone. The door shut, but the question in that kid's face stayed with me. In the kitchen, Laura's strength finally wavered. She sat at the table and pressed her fingers to her forehead. I hate that he still thinks he can do that, she whispered. I poured her water and set it down. Why do you let him? Her eyes flashed. Because when you fight someone like that, they make it worse. I sat across from her, keeping distance. You shouldn't have to do this alone. Silence. Refrigerator hum. Rain on the window. Then she spoke, quiet and raw. My ex taught me that love can turn into control. And Nate saw too much. My chest tightened. I'm sorry. She let out a small, bitter laugh. Everyone says that. And then they leave. I'm not leaving, I said too fast. Her gaze locked on mine. Don't say things you can't promise. I swallowed. I can promise I won't be another problem in your life. For the first time, she looked at me not as a risk, but as a person. Why are you so decent? Because I want you to feel safe, I thought. But I didn't say it. I had a good mom, I said. She'd be disappointed if I was anything else. Laura stared at the glass, then nodded. Thank you. For earlier. I stood. Get some sleep. As I turned away, she reached out, hesitated. Then her fingers caught my sleeve. Not a grab. A small anchor. Michael, she said, voice breaking. I can't do this. I can't start something. I faced her. I know, but neither of us moved like we meant it. She stepped closer, pulled by something neither rule nor fear could stop. Her breath trembled. The kiss was brief, soft, startled, real. More like a question than an answer. Then she pulled back as if she'd burned herself. No, she whispered. That's the rule. I nodded, heart pounding. Okay. Upstairs, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Not because of Rick. Because for 1 second, Laura had chosen me. And that was the moment I realized. The hardest part of this job wasn't the build. It was her. Staying away. The day my boss offered me a new contract, Laura didn't yell, didn't beg, didn't even look surprised. She just stared at the kitchen clock like it had betrayed her, then asked the one question that made my throat close up. How soon would you leave? I'm Michael Hayes, 28, construction crew from Ohio, 3 months in Washington on a commercial build. I came here broke enough to count gas station receipts and proud enough to pretend I was fine. I'm telling you this because I didn't expect to fall for a woman who had a rule against falling. Especially not when her 12-year-old son started looking at me like I belonged. After that night with Rick, the house changed. Not in loud ways. In small, dangerous ones. Laura and I didn't talk about the kiss. We didn't need to. It lived in the air between us like a candle we both pretended wasn't lit. We kept our distance, but our eyes didn't. When I poured coffee, she'd pass behind me and hesitate, like she was fighting the urge to rest her hand on my shoulder. When she laughed at something Nate said, she'd catch herself and glance at me as if joy required permission. Nate changed too. He stopped grunting mourning and started actually speaking. One Saturday he hovered near the garage while I fixed a loose hinge. You ever play basketball? A little, I said. He bounced the ball and nodded toward the hoop. Wanna shoot? That wanna hit me harder than it should have. Because it wasn't a kid asking a renter. It was a kid asking a man he trusted. We played in the cold sun until my arms ached. Nate talked while he shot. About school. About a teacher he hated. About how Rick always acts like he owns the street. I didn't answer with opinions. I just listened. From the porch, Laura watched us with her arms folded tight. Her face was calm, but her eyes were a storm. That night, after Nate went to bed, Laura found me by the sink rinsing a plate. She stood 2 steps away, not touching, but close enough that I could feel the heat of her presence. He likes you, she said quietly. I like him too. Her jaw tightened. That's what scares me. I turned off the faucet. Laura, I'm not trying to replace anyone. I know, she whispered, but he gets attached. And when people leave, he blames himself. The words landed like a weight. Has that happened a lot? Her eyes dropped. Enough. I wanted to step closer. I didn't. I'm here, I said instead. For now. For now, she repeated. like the phrase was poison. 2 days later, for now stopped being a vague idea and became a date on a calendar. We were on lunch break at the job site when my foreman, Dan, walked up with that look managers get when they're about to change your life without asking. "Hayes," he said, "you're solid. Company wants to keep you moving." I wiped sweat off my neck. Moving where? Oregon after this. Same pay. Longer contract. 6 months. 6 months. My first instinct was relief. Money. Stability. No more scrambling. Then I pictured Laura's kitchen, Nate's basketball, that quiet hallway at midnight. My stomach dropped. Dan clapped my shoulder. "Think it over. I need an answer by Friday." All day, steel beams felt heavier. Every hammer strike sounded like a countdown. That evening I came home later than usual. Laura was at the table with paperwork spread out, bills, school forms, lists. Real life. She looked up when I walked in and read my face instantly. "What happened?" I sat down across from her. "Dan offered me another contract. In Oregon." Her eyes didn't widen. They narrowed, like she was forcing herself to stay steady. "When?" "Right after this job ends." "How long?" 6 months. Silence pressed in. The clock ticked. Somewhere upstairs, Nate's video game chimed softly. Laura folded one paper in half, then unfolded it, like her hands needed something to control. "That's good for you." "It is," I said, and hated how weak it sounded. She looked at me then, really looked. "And what about Ohio?" "I'd go back eventually." "And what about?" She stopped herself, swallowed. "What about this house?" I wanted to tell her everything at once. That I'd started coming home early just to hear her voice. That I'd memorized the way her face softened when Nate was safe. That the word rule had stopped meaning anything to me. But I knew her. If I rushed, she'd retreat. "I don't know," I admitted. "That's why I'm quiet." Her breath shook. "You weren't supposed to matter, Michael." "That wasn't my plan," I said. She gave a small, sharp laugh, more pain than humor. "My plan was simple. Rent a room. Keep my son safe. Keep my heart out of it." "And did it work?" I asked softly. Her eyes glossed, but she blinked it back. "Don't." Before I could answer, the doorbell rang. Laura froze. Her gaze snapped to the front window like she already knew. I stood up. She whispered, "Don't open it." The bell rang again, then knocking. Rick's voice carried through the door. "Laura, I know you're in there." My blood went hot. Laura's fingers gripped the edge of the table. "Please," she said, almost soundless. "He'll make it worse if you escalate." I walked to the door anyway, but I didn't yank it open. I kept the chain on and cracked it just enough. Rick's eyes flicked over my shoulder, taking inventory. "There he is," he said with a smirk. "The hired help." "I'm renting a room," I said calmly. "It's late. Go home." Rick's smile thinned. "Funny. You're playing house real fast." Behind me, Laura's voice cut in low, controlled. "Rick, leave." Rick leaned closer to the crack in the door. "You gonna let a kid from out of state run your life?" I held my voice steady. She said leave. Rick's eyes hardened. "You don't get it, Michael. You leave. Guys like you always leave. And I'll still be here." That hit exactly where he meant it to. I felt the urge to lunge, to slam the door, to shout. Instead, I did the only thing that actually protects someone like Laura. I stayed calm. "I'm closing the door," I said. "If you come back like this, we call the police." Rick's smirk returned, but it was uglier now. "Call whoever you want." He stepped back, hands up like he was the victim. "Night, Laura," he called past me, loud enough for Nate to hear. "Hope you pick better this time." I shut the door and locked it. My hands trembled. Laura stood behind me, pale. "Now Nate will ask," she whispered. As if on cue, a small voice came from the stairs. "Mom? Who was that?" Nate stood there in pajama pants, eyes wide, trying to act brave. Laura's face softened instantly. "Just someone who doesn't listen well," she said. Nate looked at me, then back at her. "Is he gonna come back?" I answered before Laura could. "Not tonight." Nate's shoulders lowered a fraction. He nodded once and went back upstairs, trusting my word like it meant something. When he was gone, Laura turned to me with something like anger, something like fear. You shouldn't promise him things. I held her gaze. Then tell me what I'm allowed to do. Stand there while he scares you? While Nate hears it? While you hold everything alone? Her eyes flashed. You're not his father. I know, I said, voice tight, but I'm here, and I care. The last word hung between us, simple, dangerous. Laura's eyes filled despite her fight. And what happens when you take that 6-month job? That was the question. The real one. I didn't have an answer yet. Only the ache of it. Because somewhere between fixing porch lights and shooting baskets, I'd stopped being a tenant. And she'd stopped being just my landlord. I had my hand on the doorknob when Nate's voice stopped me. Are you coming back? 2 seconds earlier, I'd been a grown man with a packed bag and a plan. One step away from doing the sensible thing. Finishing my contract, taking the Oregon job, going back to Ohio when it suited me, and turning these 3 months into a story I'd tell myself on quiet nights. Then a 12-year-old kid who used to look at me like I was an intruder asked a question that made my throat burn. I'm Michael Hayes. I'm 28. I build things for a living, steel frames, walls, floors that hold weight. And if you're listening to this, it's because the hardest thing I ever tried to build wasn't on a job site. It was the courage to stay when leaving would have been easier, cleaner, safer. The last week of the project felt unreal, like the world was rushing forward while I stood still. Dan wanted my answer about Oregon. My bank account liked the idea. My old life in Ohio liked the idea. But every night in Laura's house, the silence had changed. It wasn't cold anymore. It was careful, like we were all pretending not to see the countdown on the calendar. Laura didn't bring up my decision again. She didn't ask. She didn't pressure me. She did something worse. She acted like she was already preparing to lose me. She started waking up earlier, packing Nate's lunch with extra care, rechecking locks twice, smiling in a way that didn't reach her eyes. And when our shoulders brushed in the hallway, she'd step away like she'd trained herself to. Nate tried to be tough, but he wasn't subtle. He'd hover when I fixed something, ask questions he didn't really care about. So, in Ohio, do you have snow all the time? Not all the time. Do you have a hoop? Yeah, it's bent. He nodded like he was storing that fact somewhere. Then he'd pretend it didn't matter. 2 nights before I was supposed to leave, Rick showed up again. Not banging this time. Not loud. That's what made it worse. I saw him through the front window, standing near the porch steps, hands in his pockets, waiting like he had every right to be there. Laura froze beside me. Nate was upstairs doing homework. I'll handle it, Laura whispered. She opened the door and stepped outside, pulling it closed behind her. I stayed inside, but I watched through the glass because I didn't trust him. I saw Rick lean in, saw his mouth move fast, sharp. I saw Laura's shoulders tighten like she was bracing for impact. Then Rick glanced at the window at me and smiled. That smile said, "You're temporary." Laura said something I couldn't hear. Rick's jaw flexed. He stepped closer, not touching but invading. Laura held her ground, but her hands trembled at her sides. That was it for me. I opened the door and stepped out, keeping my voice calm. Rick, you need to leave. Rick turned, amused. Look who it is. Captain Rent-A-Room. Go home, I said. Tonight. Don't come back. Rick's eyes narrowed. You think you can talk to me like that? I'm not trying to talk, I said. I'm setting a boundary. He laughed, low. She doesn't need boundaries. She needs someone who can actually be here. Laura flinched like the words hit a bruise. I felt my anger rise, but I kept it locked down. You're scaring her. You're scaring her son. If you come back, we call the police. That's not a threat. That's the next step. Rick stared at me, then at Laura, like he was deciding which of us to punish. Finally, he lifted his hands. Fine, he said, stepping back. You got your little moment. He looked at Laura one last time. When he leaves, and he will, you'll remember who stayed. He walked away into the dark. Laura didn't move for a long second. Then she exhaled, shaky. You shouldn't have done that. I know, I said, but I couldn't watch. Her eyes flashed. And what happens when you're gone? The question wasn't about Rick. It was about everything. I didn't answer. Not yet, because I needed to be honest. And honesty was the one thing scarier than leaving. The next morning was my last day on site. I told Dan I needed until the end of the day to decide. He frowned but nodded. Don't drag it out, Hayes. I drove home with my decision still stuck in my throat like a nail. Inside, the house smelled like coffee and laundry detergent. Laura was at the sink. Nate sat at the table tapping a pencil. My duffel bag was already by the stairs. Laura didn't look at it. She didn't look at me. She just said quietly, "Your room is paid through Friday. You don't have to rush." Nate's pencil stopped tapping. I set my keys on the counter. My hands were sweating. "Nate, can you go upstairs for a minute?" He looked between us, suspicious. "Why? Just, please." He pushed back his chair and walked up slowly, like he didn't want to miss whatever was happening. When his door clicked shut, Laura finally turned. Her eyes were steady, but the sadness in them was familiar now. "Michael," she said softly, "you don't owe us anything." That sentence would have been easier if it was true. "I know," I said, "but I want to." Laura's breath caught. "Don't do this unless you're sure." "I'm not sure," I admitted. "I'm terrified." That made her blink, like she wasn't used to men saying it out loud. I stepped closer, still careful, still respectful. "I came here thinking I'd work, sleep, save money, leave. Then I met you, and I met Nate, and somehow, your house started feeling like the first place in years where I wasn't just surviving." Laura's eyes filled. She swallowed hard. "My rule was there for a reason." "I know," I said. "You were protecting yourself. And him." She nodded once. "You don't understand what it's like to rebuild after someone breaks you." "I don't," I said. "But I understand what it's like to choose the safe option and still feel empty." Her shoulders shook. She tried to hide it. I reached out, slowly, giving her time to stop me. I took her hand. She didn't pull away. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked. Nate was listening. Laura whispered, "If you stay, it can't be a fantasy. Nate can't handle another almost." "I won't be an almost," I said. Then I forced myself to say the hardest part. "But I also won't pretend I can fix everything overnight. I'm 28. I'm still building my life." Her voice broke. "Then why?" "Because I'd rather build it with you," I said. "If you'll let me." Silence. Just the hum of the refrigerator, the rain starting again outside like it had on the first night. Laura lifted our joined hands to her forehead, eyes closed, like she was finally letting herself feel what she'd been holding back. Then she looked at me, really looked, and her expression softened into something honest. "You should take the Oregon job," she whispered. My stomach dropped. "Laura, listen," she said, squeezing my hand. "You should take it because it's good for you. And if we do this, we do it right. We don't cut your future off at the knees. We make a plan." Plan. Adult words. Not romance movie nonsense. Real life. I let out a shaky laugh. "So, you're saying stay but also go?" "I'm saying choose us," she said. "Even if it's hard." I felt my eyes burn. "I can do hard." Nate's door opened upstairs. He came down 2 steps, trying to look casual and failing. Laura looked up. "Nate." He froze, caught. "I wasn't. I just..." Laura held out her free hand. "Come here." Nate walked down slowly. Laura pulled him close with one arm and held my hand with the other. The 3 of us stood in the kitchen like something fragile and new. Nate stared at me. "Are you leaving?" I swallowed. "Not today." His eyes narrowed. "Are you coming back?" I looked at Laura. She nodded once, brave and terrified at the same time. "Yes," I said to him. "I'm coming back." Nate's shoulders dropped like he'd been carrying a weight alone. He didn't smile big. He just nodded, small, serious, and whispered, "Okay." That afternoon I called Dan. I told him yes to Oregon with conditions. Weekends back when possible. Transfer options later. I didn't know if it would all work. But for the first time, I wasn't choosing the easiest road. Because 3 months in a rented room taught me something I never learned in Ohio. Sometimes the bravest thing a man can do isn't to leave with dignity. It's to stay with responsibility.